All right, good morning. We're going to call the docket. Say your name, please say present or here. Mr. Enox, I see that you're here. Ms. Johnson, I see that you're here. What about Charlotte Robinson? Ms. Robinson, thank you. Understanding that Mr. Petty has been arrested and he's in the Vincent County Jail, so we'll call his case at 1:30. What about Ms. Kaufman? Ms. Keisha Kaufman?
Judge, I haven't seen her. I was gonna try to call or text. She was one that we had reset from May 12th, so that was a trial that week in Smith County, and I sent her a reset notice. She sent it back to me, and I got that sent in to the court, and I'm almost certain it had today's date on there, so that she would have known about it. I hadn't heard from her since then, but I'll try to get in touch with her. I think she's living in Dallas now. So I'll see if I can get a hold of her first of all, and try to get her here as soon as I can, or somewhere in the afternoon.
Let me double check the notice of appearance. See anything this afternoon? This afternoon. Mr. Sanders, I've reviewed the notice of appearance, and it does say today's date, May 26th at 9 a.m. So,
And Judge, I was gonna let you know too, when she texted it, she took a photo and texted it back to me after she had signed it, and it did have what was texted back to me already had the May 26th date on it. And I think she was also, I told her to call the court's office sometime that week, and from what I understand, she never did call the office.
okay. Well, I'll have her name called, and if you get in contact with her, then you'll let us know. CR 21-367, State versus Charlotte May Robinson, we're set for docket call today.
Hey, Judge, we have a plea agreement we're gonna be entering. We're gonna do a jury waiver today and then ask to set it for a plea.
Will the plea be for probation or time?
Probation.
Probation. We don't want to do the paperwork today, or do we need time?
I think we need a little bit of time, but we'll be able to get it all resolved.
All right, Ms. Robinson, if you'll raise your right hand, I'm going to place you under oath. Ma'am, do you swear that the testimony you give to the court today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
All right, you may put your hand down. Your name is Charlotte May Robinson, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Robinson, in this case, you are charged by indictment with a state jail felony of possession of controlled substance in penalty group 1, less than 1 gram. Also in this case, you are represented by your attorney, Mr. Jeff Sanders. Are you pleased with Mr. Sanders' representation of you?
Yes, sir.
You feel like you've had enough time to discuss this waiver of jury trial document with him?
Yes, sir.
Have you read over this document? Do you understand what it says?
I was told that it said yes, sir.
Okay. And can you tell me what your understanding of this document is and what it means?
That I am agreeing to waive a jury trial, and that it'll be reset for an appearance to plea to the probation 1/3. And if I decide to not accept that plea on the next hearing, that I could go in front of you as opposed to a jury trial.
Okay, that's good. That's good. You understand that you have the absolute right to have a jury trial in this case?
I do.
Do you understand that the only way that jury trial can be taken away from you is if you waive it?
I do.
Do you understand that? And do you understand, Ms. Robinson, that if you waive that right to a jury trial and later you change your mind and say, I decide I want that, it may not be given back to you? Do you understand that?
Yes, sir. I understand.
So you have carefully considered all of the consequences of waiving a jury trial. You understand that the jury trial is where you get a chance to bring in a jury of your peers. You get to confront the state's witnesses, cross-examine their witnesses, confront their evidence. And you understand that if you waive that jury trial, you can still do all of those things, but you won't be able to do it in front of a jury.
I do understand,
All
sir.
right. And Ms. Robinson, has anyone threatened or forced you or made you feel like you had to waive your right to a jury trial?
No, sir.
All right, so you're wanting to waive this jury trial because that's what you want to do in this case.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, the court will find that Ms. Robinson has been admonished as to her right to a jury trial and that she has intentionally, knowingly, and voluntarily waived that right. The court will find that Mr. Sanders has counseled Ms. Robinson on this waiver of jury trial, has joined her in its waiver, and that Ms. Heisel has waived the state's waiver or has waived the state's right to a jury trial as well. And the court will approve the waiver of jury trial. The court will set Ms. Robinson to enter her plea before the court. Do you have a proposed date, Mr. Sanders?
Judge, I don't know if the last Thursday in June, if that would work.
No, I don't think we have the last Thursday in June. We have a Tuesday in June, but that's our evidentiary day. This is what I've got. So my next 3 criminal docket dates: June 2nd, 14th, 16th. The next 3 docket dates.
The 16th will be fine. I've got, I think, a couple hearings set in Gregg County at 8 o'clock that morning, but if it's okay if I run a little bit late, June 16th would be fine.
Okay. All right, Mr. Robinson, the court's going to set you to enter your plea on June 16th. You want me to have her here at 9 and you just come a little later? Do you want me to set it later?
If we can do it a little bit later, set it for a little bit later, that'd be.
All right, court will set this at, I'm going to set it at 11, but I hope that we'll already have the paperwork done. She can go through the paperwork, get that done quickly, and get her pled before noon. Okay. We'll set it, plea at 11 o'clock.
Okay. Thank you, Judge.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Ms. Robinson, once you sign and get the yellow copy, you're free to go.
Thank you.
That cause number CR 21324, State versus Chase Ray Enox, has been reset by agreement of the parties. And that has been, and also with consent of the court, that's been reset to June 28th at 9 a.m. All right, now court calls cause number CR 21295, State versus Jamie Wayne Johnson. Today, I believe that we are set on a status for the pretrial release drug test. I believe that reset this so that the state could bring a witness to testify about the positive test that was given, submitted by Ms. Johnson. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, the state ready to call the witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
State would first call Jarvis Crawford to the stand.
All right, Mr. Crawford.
Judge, before we get started, I think this case may be set next week as well for another status after this hearing. Can we address that? I don't know if it'd be necessary to have another.
Yes, we can. We can. All right, Mr. Jarvis Crawford, if you will raise your right hand. Sir, do you swear that the testimony given before today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes. So I see. All right, so Heisley, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Crawford, how are you currently employed?
Benson County Probation Department.
And do you, in your job duties at the Van Zandt County Probation Department, do you supervise some people on pretrial release?
Yes.
And is Jamie Wayne Johnson on your pretrial release caseload?
Yes.
And on April the 26th of this year, while in court, did you test Ms. Johnson for illicit substances by urinalysis?
Yes. She came over to report after court.
Okay, she came to report after court.
Yes.
And what is y'all's internal policy on collecting a specimen for somebody who is not the same sex as the probation officer?
We get someone that is the same sex to test that individual.
Okay, and so in this case, who observed the actual collection of Ms. Johnson's specimen?
I don't recall off the top of my head. I believe Officer Clark.
Okay. And then do you, other than the actual collection of the specimen, do you oversee the rest of that testing protocol?
Yes.
Did you send that specimen off to the lab for confirmation of your initial testing results?
I did.
And what were your initial testing results?
It was positive for THC, benzos, and amphetamine.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Mr. Crawford, I'm going to show you what's been marked States Exhibit 1. Can you identify this document for the record?
Yes.
What is it?
It's our lab form that we send off, and the results of the drug test that we have to fill out.
Okay, and reviewing that, do you see both your and Ms. Clark's signatures on them?
I do.
And when was that laboratory test sent off to the lab?
It was placed in the freezer on the 26th. Looks like it was received the next day on the 27th.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, state's going to offer statement.
There being no objection, State's Exhibit 1 is admitted.
And Mr. Crawford, I'm now showing you it's been marked State's Exhibit 2. Can you identify this document?
Yes, there's the document that the lab will send us with the results of the test.
Okay, and if you would just kind of flip through it, is that a true and correct copy of the lab results that were submitted back to you from the lab?
It is.
And just to clarify for the record, when I say the lab, do you guys use a laboratory in Tyler for testing that's literally called the lab?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Your Honor, I would offer a statement.
Judge, at this time, I don't know if the predicate's been appropriately addressed at this point, so I would make an objection. I think there's another witness that can probably verify that.
Okay, court will sustain the objection.
And Mr. Crawford, after you received the confirmation from the lab or the report from the lab, what was your next step as the pretrial release officer?
Notified the courts of the results of the test.
And were you under the belief at that time that the results of the test were a violation of Ms. Johnson's pretrial release conditions?
Yes, the positive THC is a violation of pretrial conditions.
And did Ms. Johnson give you, there were multiple things that she tested positive for according to your initial testing, is that correct?
Yes.
And did she offer you any explanations or documentation regarding to the categories that she was positive for?
Yes, she had prescriptions for the amphetamine and benzos.
Okay,
Yes.
so 2 of the categories she provided you prescriptions for.
Yes.
And then the THC, did she provide, I mean, there's no prescription for THC, but did she provide you with an explanation for that result?
Yes, she had, excuse me, she had told me before the test that she had used CBD.
Okay. And what is your experience with CBD products?
Typically, it would not test positive for, excuse me, I'm sorry. Typically, it would not test positive for THC on our testing.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to calls for witnesses qualified to render at this time.
Teisel, do you have any additional questions for Mr. Crawford that could establish whether he has personal experience or technical experience on whether or not he's administered other drug tests that have either registered for THC or not registered for THC?
Yes, Your Honor, I will develop that line of questioning.
Okay, I'll sustain the objection at this time. Allow further questioning.
Thank you. Mr. Crawford, how long have you been a probation officer?
Soon to be 9 years.
Have you had other people under your supervision who have claimed to use CBD products while on probation?
Yes.
Okay. And have you had people claim to use CBD products and then their test results come back negative for THC?
I don't recall. I mean, I've had people claim to use CBD products, and when tests are in fact positive for THC. So,
Your Honor, I pass this.
Mr. Tyra?
Thank you. Mr. Crawford, my name's Alex Tyra. You understand I represent Ms. Johnson?
yes, sir.
Okay. I don't know if you and I have actually spoken, but we've emailed back and forth. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And have you been the supervising pretrial officer for Ms. Johnson since she was placed on pretrial?
I have.
Have you, aside from this situation that you're testifying here about today, have you had any issues with Ms. Johnson reporting or failing any prior drug tests?
No, sir.
How many prior drug tests had you given Ms. Johnson?
No, one for sure, like 1 or 2.
Okay. So at least 1, maybe 2 prior to the April 26th test?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And did she pass those tests?
Yes, sir.
Essentially, she was negative for any prior THC. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did her other prescriptions show up on those prior tests?
Yes.
And did prior to or during your supervision of Ms. Johnson, did she indicate to you that she suffers from MS or multiple sclerosis?
Yes.
And did she also give you the information from her doctor regarding the basis for the Adderall, I believe, and the benzodiazepines that she was prescribed?
I remember receiving a copy of her prescriptions and things that she were taking. I don't remember if it goes into detail on the specific situations.
Okay. Isn't it true that Ms. Johnson has an ankle monitor,
Yes,
and do you monitor that?
yes,
Has she been compliant with her, I guess, pretrial orders on where she's supposed to be?
yes.
And in fact, did she recently move back to Van Zandt County from Rockwall?
I believe in the process.
And has she kept you up to date on that?
She has.
And did she contact you ahead of that time? And my office also contact you to make sure that that was done appropriately? So there weren't any problems and concerns about where she was going to be physically?
Yes, sir.
Now, did Ms. Johnson, prior to the test that you administered or requested that she provide on April 26th, did Ms. Johnson advise you that she had some dental work done?
I believe so.
Okay. Did she tell you she had several teeth pulled?
I don't recall the exact dental work, but I believe she told me about dental work. Yes.
Okay. Did she tell you that she had used CBD because of that dental work?
She did tell me she had used CBD. Yes.
And was that prior to the testing, prior to her taking the drug test?
Yes.
How often do you see or have contact with Ms. Johnson?
Once a month.
Is she required to email you or call and check in addition to you seeing her?
Not outside of the GPS.
How often do you check her GPS?
It just kind of depends.
Just briefly, how does that work? Would you get an alert if she's out of the area she's supposed to be in?
Yes.
Okay, so if everything's fine, you're not going to get notified of it, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, at any time, there were no other, in the other one, maybe two drug tests, in addition to the April 26th drug tests, there were no other substances detected, such as hydrocodone or other opiate ever detected in her samples. Isn't that correct?
I don't recall that off the top of my head.
Okay. Now, there was some testimony earlier about the CBD. Are you familiar with what CBD is?
Yes.
And is that basically a substance that is advertised quite a lot and it's available over the counter?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that you can go to the grocery store and just about anywhere now has items with CBD in them?
Yes.
Are you familiar with any of the regulations on those products?
Just a little from what I've read.
Okay, what do you believe those regulations are? What are you familiar with anyway?
That there's a certain amount, a certain percentage that is legal as far as the THC is concerned in the CBDs. And if it's over that, it can't be sold legally in stores.
Okay. Is it a restriction on or a violation of pretrial bond conditions in general for a person to use CBD?
It doesn't state CBD specifically. If it, like I said, if it's over legal amount that's sold, then that would be a violation.
Okay. I'll pass.
Tizer, any additional questions from Mr. Crawford?
No, Your Honor, we would rest and ask that this witness be excused.
The objection, Mr. Tyler? He'll be
Not-
finally
I'm sorry.
excused.
I'm sorry, Judge, just to clarify the record. We have no further questions for this witness. We do have an additional witness.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't, if he wants to, I'm sure he's available if I need to recall him, but I don't anticipate that this time.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Please step down. Ms. Heisel, your next witness.
Your Honor, we would call Tom Thompson from the lab.
Mr. Thompson. All right. Mr. Thompson, do raise your right hand, sir. Sir, do you swear that the testimony you give to the court today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please have a seat. That chair does move. Around, make yourself comfortable. Get close to the microphone.
Okay.
Words over here to your left, or then speak up so that everyone can hear you. She's going to be taking down the record. Do our best not to speak over the attorneys as they're asking questions. Counsel, if you'll extend that same courtesy to the witness, I appreciate it. Go ahead, Ms. Heisel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Thompson, would you state your name for the record?
Tom A. Thompson, THE Lab. I'm the director of THE Lab.
Okay. And what are some of your job duties as director?
Perform all the confirmation testing and am responsible for the records that we keep at the lab.
So you personally run the analysis on the testing, is that correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Mr. Thompson, I'm going to show you what has been marked State's Exhibit 2. You would just review that document. Do you recognize that document?
Yes.
And what is that?
This is our laboratory report generated by our Olympus chemistry analyzer.
And there is some writing on that report. Can you identify who made those notations on the report?
Yes, it was myself.
Okay. Is this a true and accurate copy of both the results and your notes on those results?
Yes, the results that I released to the probation department.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, I would move to admit State's Exhibit 2.
All right, there being no objection, State's Exhibit 2 is admitted.
And Mr. Thompson, on that, Martin heard some testimony that there were medical records submitted for the amphetamine and for the benzodiazepam. I believe that's what it was that appeared on that test. But there is also a positive result for THC. Is that correct?
True.
And can you tell us a little bit about your machines at THE Lab? Is that, how are those calibrated in regards to THC concentration?
We set our cutoff on calibration to agree with the NIDA cutoff. We also have a cutoff that we use for court to pretty much eliminate the possibility of secondhand exposure.
Okay, so
and we ran both of those cutoffs for THC.
okay, so am I understanding you correctly that not just any amount of THC result would produce a positive result on your test? You have a higher threshold. Is that correct?
True.
And that threshold is intended to assure that this couldn't be some kind of secondhand exposure, or could it be possibly low level exposure?
True.
Okay. Mr. Thompson, are you aware of the legalized concentration of THC in a product in the state of Texas?
Yes.
What is that?
It's 0.3.
And being aware of that, do you calibrate your machines with that percentage in mind?
We calibrate for the legal cutoffs of 50 and 20. Our instrument has the capability of detecting down to, now I'm talking about in the urine, down to 5 nanograms of THC, delta 9 THC.
Okay. And I know the concentration that we're talking about is the concentration within a product.
Right.
But then the numbers that you're talking about that's the concentration in the urine. Is that correct?
The specimen, yes, true.
Okay. And so knowing what the legal threshold is, do you personally believe it would be possible, based on your calibration and your research on the subject, if someone was simply using or just using a CBD product that had under 0.03% THC, would that produce a positive result on your test?
No,
And on Miss Johnson's test specifically, what was the level that was returned by the instrument on that?
220 nanograms.
And what does that mean to you in terms of usage of THC?
It's a moderately positive. We've had them had results that are much higher than that, and of course we had results that are much lower than that.
So do you believe if someone were taking over the counter under 0.03% CBD products, that would produce a positive result?
Not above the 50 nanogram, and probably not above the 20 nanogram cutoff.
Okay. And is it my understanding that Ms. Johnson's specimen returned back above those levels for each of those categories?
True.
Your Honor, I pass the witness.
Mr. Thompson, my name's Alex Tyra. You understand I represent Ms. Johnson in this case? Is that a yes?
Pardon me?
Is that a yes? I saw you nodded your head.
Oh, yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Maybe you did speak out, but I couldn't hear you. The court reporter's got to get your answers.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay. Now you and I have never discussed this case prior to today. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
All right. So your testimony, you own the lab, or you're the director of the lab?
Both.
Okay. And just briefly, what are your qualifications as far as educational and certifications to operate your lab and perform the testing that you do?
I'm certified by the American Society of Clinical Pathologists. Our laboratory was a DPS lab before they closed down that certifying agency, and we're a CAP certified lab.
You say certified, that you're certified specifically, are you a chemist?
I'm a medical technologist. My specialty, when I was in school and working in the workplace initially, was in hematology and toxicology.
Okay. Now, what on the urine screening that you performed, when did you receive that? When did you receive that sample?
I'll have to look at my requisition.
You have tested it the same day that you received it?
I'll look here. Hands. It was picked up on the 27th.
Okay.
And collected on the 26th. And we tested it, the specimen, on the 28th of April.
All right. The 28th is what's indicated on your report. Is that correct?
True.
Now, and I'll get back to this a little bit later, but on the second page of this report that I have, there's a graph attached with some peaks on it. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay. And below that graph indicates that there's no illicit amines.
True.
And so is that specifically Is that graph and those peaks, are those specifically referring to amphetamine testing?
Yes, yes.
All right, so these peaks don't have, excuse me, these peaks don't have anything to do with the THC testing. Is that correct?
Right, this is just for amphetamine, methamphetamine.
All right. Now, in the methodology that you use in testing for the THC, will that generate a report with peaks as well?
Yes,
All right. And why weren't those peaks attached to?
we use thin layer chromatography and it, for that confirmation, and it's, a paper chromatogram, and it's a manual procedure that produces no, equipment printout.
Okay. And what was the machine or equipment that you used to do the testing on the verification of the THC? Well, let me back up. Do you use a different machine to test for amphetamines versus THC?
True, yes,
So you would take the same sample and check it for one substance on one machine and another substance on a different machine?
get thin layer chromatography. It doesn't really have a machine. It's a procedure that we use that's, a chromatograph, similar to mass spec gas chromatography.
Now, do you have any, what is a derivatizing agent?
Derivatizing reagent,
Yes. Sir.
That-
What is that?
that's reagent that we add to the, urine sample to bind the drug so it won't burn up in the mass spec. It's a stabilizing substance.
Okay. What derivatizing reagents were used for the marijuana test?
TAAF.
Explain what that is.
It's a common derivatizing reagent for GCMS.
And so that's just a substance that you would purchase through suppliers to make that.
True.
Now, would you agree that there is a difference between chemical compounds, CBD and THC?
True. There are some variations.
And the CBD, that stands for cannabidiol. Isn't that correct?
That's one.
Cannabidiol?
Right.
Okay, and the THC, if we're talking about THC, we're talking about delta 9
Tetrahydrocannabinol.
Okay. Isn't it true that there's some other derivatives of the delta where the bonds are switched in those types of substances, such as delta 8 and delta 10?
Right.
Isn't it true that if those substances are present, those can be hard to determine delta 9 from delta 8?
Yes.
Did the testing that you performed on those, on the THC, is there a procedure to determine whether or not that THC that was positive in that test was related to delta 8 or delta 10?
Yes, there is a test. We refer those to Quest Diagnostics.
Okay. And this test was not referred to Quest Diagnostics, was it?
Yes, it was. I haven't gotten the hard copy results back yet, though. I checked on them just a little while ago. It's in testing. They isolated a substance in the specimen. Well, they have isolated substances in the specimen, and they're performing GCMS now.
So essentially, would you agree that the problem with those two substances is they're similar in the structure resemblance between that and THC? It's hard to determine that.
I don't think it's a problem. We tested the substance and it was positive for Delta 9 THC.
Okay. Isn't it true that there have been, issues with Delta 8 or Delta 10 actually being false positives for the Delta 9?
Yes,
So what testing did you request Quest Diagnostic to perform specifically?
to do an initial screening. They use an ELISA test to initially screen and then perform mass spec gas chromatography.
So will that test be able to differentiate whether or not that substance was the Delta 9 derivative, the Delta 8 derivative, or a Delta 10 derivative?
Yes,
Okay. So we've had, you've been in court when we were talking to the probation officer earlier, correct?
true. I've been in court several times.
Okay. And when we've talked about CBD, you seem to be familiar with that.
Yes,
And would you also agree that that is a common substance now that people can buy over the counter at multiple locations?
true.
Would you also agree that Delta 8 or Delta 10 is also a similar substance that seems to be advertised and seems to be available for sale in various locations as well over the counter?
True.
Are you familiar? Would you agree that given the new nature of these substances, there's not a whole lot of regulation regarding CBD and Delta 8s and Delta 10s?
There's legislation before the court now. In Texas, Delta 8 THC is considered to be a positive if it's present in Texas. And it's a temporary ruling until the whole thing plays out in federal court.
And so, but my question is, a lot of these products that are out there really aren't subject to a lot of regulation. There's some questions as to the amounts of what substances are in there, and whether or not there's 0.3 levels of THC in some of these substances. Would you agree with that?
If it's sold in Texas, it has to be below 0.3%.
I understand that's the law, but are you aware of whether or not there's variances in producers of these substances?
True, there are variances.
All right, so there may be one producer that may not be following that law, and there may be others that aren't.
True.
And so, would you agree there probably needs to be either some more regulation or some type of more oversight of those substances?
True.
Okay.
I think that's coming.
All right. Now, when you are provided the sample, are you given information as to any what the individuals have advised as to any substances that may be present? Like if there is a prescription for a substance, are you given that information when you're testing it?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Do you know whether or not you were in this case?
I was not in this case until later.
And were you given information regarding any statements that were made by my client to the probation department that CBD had been used?
Yes,
Okay, so you knew that before you tested it. Is that correct?
no,
So you knew that after obviously you know that now, but you didn't know that prior to testing.
true.
Have you made any changes to the methodology of the testing that you're using for THC since the passage of the September 1st, 2019 law?
No.
You're using the same test you used prior to September 19th.
True.
And have you switched any of your machinery or instruments since September 1st, 19th?
No.
Now, just briefly going back to the Delta 8s and the Delta 10 issues, are you familiar with any lab studies to address the issue of the determination of Delta 8 versus Delta 9 or Delta 10 versus Delta 9?
There, I just am aware that there have been studies done, and I've read the information on a few of them. I'm not aware of every single study that's been done. No.
And those are still ongoing as we speak. Isn't that correct?
Say that again.
Aren't there multiple studies still ongoing as we speak?
True.
So at this time, would it be fair to say that you don't know whether or not any of the peaks that would have been observed in your test results, if those peaks contain Delta 8 or Delta 9? Obviously, you think they contain Delta 9. Is that correct?
True.
But at this time, you don't know until you get lab results back from Quest whether or not Delta 8 or Delta 10 were actually contained in those peaks. Is that right?
That's true.
I'll pass the mic.
Title. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I do have a question for Mr. Thompson. So, Mr. Thompson, the report that you're anticipating from Quest, which Mr. Tyrus question regarding the Delta 8, Delta 10, how would the report from Quest Diagnostics further your testimony for the court today on whether or not Ms. Johnson would be consuming either THC through regular ingestion, marijuana, or through a CBD product? Would that Quest diagnostic report further your testimony? Would that give you additional testimony to lend to the court on whether or not she has violated the conditions of her pretrial release?
It would allow me to say that not only our laboratory detected Delta 9 THC, but a SAMHSA certified lab also detected Delta 9 THC.
So if the Quest report comes back, it's either going to confirm Delta 9 or it's going to confirm possibly Delta 8 or Delta 10.
True.
Any additional questions for Mr. Thompson, Mr. Tyree?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Appreciate it. Ms. Simmons.
seeing us this time.
Mr. Tyree, any witnesses or evidence?
Your Honor, and I guess I'll ask the court on how you want to proceed, and I don't know the court's thoughts on this as well. Obviously, I brought up the issue of the CBD and the Delta 8s and the Delta 9s. I anticipate calling my client for the limited purpose only of the pretrial release and her medical conditions and the statement that she made regarding the CBD to the probation department. I can do that now, or if the court was wanting to wait to see the results from Quest Lab, we can do it at that time, but I'm prepared to call her just for that limited purpose.
Let's go ahead and call your client, and then we'll take into consideration also Quest.
All right. I'll call my client just for the limited purpose only of this issue.
Yes, sir. Ms. Johnson, can you raise your right hand? Now, do you swear that the testimony you give to the court today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Chair does move around, make yourself comfortable. Get as close to you to the microphone as you can. Speak up loud for this. And the record will reflect that Ms. Johnson is being called for the limited purposes of the hearing on the court's conditions of pretrial release. Go ahead, Mr. Connor.
May I proceed?
You may, sir.
Jamie, would you state your full name for the record, please?
Jamie Wayne Johnson.
And Ms. Johnson, you agree you're the person that's being supervised in this cause under the pretrial release, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And we've heard from Mr. Crawford here today. Is he in fact the pretrial officer that you've been reporting to?
Yes, sir.
In general, do you agree that you've been attempting to comply with all of your pretrial conditions?
Yes, sir.
And you also agree that you have an ankle monitor currently on, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Aside from this issue regarding THC, are you aware of any other allegations that you violated your pretrial release?
No, sir.
Would it also be fair to say that you don't have any prior criminal history? Is that right?
No, sir.
I don't have the date, but shortly after your arrest, you bonded out on this case. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And then subsequent to your release from jail, that's when you reported to pretrial and got set up with their program. Is that
Yes,
fair?
sir. That's correct.
All right. Now, Ms. Johnson, do you suffer from any medical conditions currently?
I do from multiple sclerosis.
And have you been prescribed? Do you also suffer from any psychiatric issues as well?
I do, yes.
What are those issues?
ADHD, I have anxiety, bipolar.
And under your ADHD, have you been prescribed Adderall?
Yes, sir.
And I believe there's testimony that you provided prescriptions for that. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And also for the anxiety, were you prescribed Xanax?
Yes, sir.
And did you provide those prescriptions to your pretrial officer? as
I
well?
did.
And so those would have been the positive results for the amphetamine, for the Adderall, and the benzodiazepines for the Xanax.
Yes, sir.
All right. And do you take those as prescribed? Take that medication as prescribed?
Yes, sir.
Now, have you had, at the end of March and the beginning of April, did you have some issues with your teeth?
I did.
Did you see a dentist regarding that?
Yes, sir.
And who was the dentist that you saw?
It was Dr. Curtis.
And is that Joshua Curtis?
It is
And where is his office?
in Rockwall.
And did you ultimately end up having several teeth extracted?
I did, yes, sir.
How many teeth did you have extracted?
I had my 2 canines too.
And was that a pleasant experience?
Absolutely not.
Did it cause you considerable pain?
It did, yes, sir.
I can approach Judge.
You may.
Ms. Johnson, I'm going to show you what I've marked as Exhibit D1. Could you describe what that document is?
This is ultimately the treatment. Yeah, it would be the treatment plan for.
Okay, that's the treatment plan for your dental issues?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Okay, and does that contain dates when you saw the doctor and contain statements of services you provided?
This page is just the treatment plan.
Okay, and does it also, the treatment plan, was that addressed on March 31st?
It was, yes, sir.
All right, and does the second page on this address dates where services were provided to you as well?
That is correct.
And specifically on April 1st, it indicates there was extraction that was taken care of and paid the bill for that. Is that correct?
It is.
And is that the date that your teeth were actually extracted?
It was.
Did the doctor, Curtis, also give you prescriptions?
He did, yes, sir.
And I'm going to show you what I marked as D2. Could you tell the court what that is? Is that a copy of your prescription records?
It is, yes, sir.
Is that from Dr. Curtis?
It is, yes, sir.
Okay. And did you actually receive prescriptions for hydrocodone
Yes,
and amoxicillin
yes,
and prednisone?
yes, sir.
Is that like a steroid?
It is, yes, sir.
Okay. And did you take any of the hydrocodone?
I took one and it made me sick, so I did not take any more after that.
What about the steroid? Take any of that?
Same as well with that.
So those two made you sick and
Yes, sir.
stop taking those?
Yes, sir.
All right. It's not taking them all.
Yeah.
There being no objection, D1 and D2 are admitted.
So would it be fair to say that the hydrocodone was prescribed for the pain for your mouth?
Yes, sir.
Since it made you sick, did you take other steps to try to relieve that pain?
I did. Yes, sir.
You realize why we're here today is because there's a positive result for THC on your urine sample that was submitted.
Yes, sir.
All right. What did you actually, had you used any THC? Had you smoked any marijuana or used any
No, sir.
form of marijuana?
No, sir.
Did you use any CBD?
Yes,
Did you admit that to Mr. Crawford?
I did.
What do you know? What brand of CBD you got?
I do not.
What type of? What form was it? How was it?
Drops in a bottle.
So you got a bottle with some.
The dropper.
Was it like a liquid substance?
It was, yes, sir. Oil.
So how did you put that in your mouth?
I put them directly on the teeth where they were extracted.
And how often did you use that after the extraction of your teeth?
For about 4 days, 5 days.
And how many times a day did you use that?
Twice. 2 times a day.
Okay. And do you know where you got that CBD?
I do.
Where did you get it?
In Rockwall.
Was
It was at a vape shop in Rockwall.
So did you purchase that over the counter?
I did, yes, sir.
Was there anything about that when you purchased that you believed to be illegal?
No, sir.
Have you intentionally tried to violate your bond conditions by using any substances that you haven't been prescribed?
No, sir.
Do you know whether or not that CBD contained any Delta 8 or Delta 10?
I do not know.
Now, do you also see a psychiatrist as well?
Yes, sir, I did.
That Dr. Randall Lane?
Yes, sir.
How long have you seen Dr. Lane?
It's been over 10 years now.
And in our response to this, did we attach a letter from him?
Yes,
does he, do you provide any drug testing, for his office, or does he require that for any of your treatment?
No, sir, he does not.
Have you ever had any history of substance abuse during your time periods?
No, sir.
Dr. Dr. Lane?
No, sir.
Did you also advise Dr. Lane, about this issue?
I did.
Did he submit this, this letter, on your behalf as well?
Yes, sir.
Have you reviewed that letter?
Yes, sir.
Are his, descriptions of the treatment that he provides to you, are those true and accurate that you currently receive?
Yes, sir, they're true.
Your Honor?
No objection.
I offer D3.
There being no objection, D3 is admitted.
Your Honor, as far as D1, 2, and 3, since those are medical records, I would ask that the court seal those. So they're not public records.
All right, the record will reflect that this court is sealing defense exhibits 1, 2, and 3 as they do contain protected medical information for Ms. Johnson.
How many drug tests have you taken since you've been on pretrial?
2 for sure, maybe 3, but 2 for sure.
On the 1 or 2 prior to the April 26th test, had you tested positive for any other substance other than your prescriptions?
No, sir.
And so on your, would you agree that your drug test that was on April 26th, that did not appear to even show the 1-hydrocodone that you took, that you had the prescription for? Is that correct?
Can you repeat or rephrase that?
Do you know whether or not the hydrocodone showed up on the drug test that you
I
took?
do not know.
But aside from that one pill, you didn't take any other?
No, sir.
Have you missed any reporting dates with your pretrial?
No, sir.
And how often do you stay in touch with your officer?
I report monthly, and if I need to go outside the boundaries that are set, I notify him.
Okay. As far as you're aware, you haven't had any other violations of your?
No, sir.
release?
No, sir.
I'll pass the witness.
Sorry.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Johnson, how much research or back history with THC products did you have before you purchased some?
I did not have any.
So you didn't look into what might be legal, what might be illegal in terms of concentrations and things along those lines?
No, ma'am.
Are you aware that CBD products are carried in a lot of doctors' offices, chiropractors, in medical settings? Are you aware if that's true or not?
I don't know no, I'm not aware.
So you just went to the vape shop, and how did that go? Did you just ask them for something that would help with pain? What?
I was in pain. I couldn't take the hydrocodone. My best friend I'm living with currently suggested CBD, and that's for her. And she has used it for pain in her mouth, and that's where I went.
And then did you just assume that if they were selling it, then it was legal?
That's correct.
Your Honor, I pass it.
Mr. Tyler,
No other questions?
thank you, Ms. Johnson. You may stand.
Thank you.
Mr. Tyler, any additional witnesses or evidence?
No, Your Honor.
State, based on testimony today about the nature of the testing, the state is going to ask to set this off. My understanding is there is no set date back as on the So, Your Honor, we would just ask to hold our motion over until that additional information can be obtained for both parties. Because there is some question about the legality of the different isomers of THC. We believe that that would be the most appropriate action at this time.
Mr. Tyra.
Judge, I don't, as far as, I think that's the only other issue that we would have that the court would need to know as far as ruling on this case. Our position isn't going to change. My clients testified that she used CBD. And basically, I'm sure the court's aware of, it's pretty common. You see billboards for it, and they're at grocery stores, and convenience stores. They're all over the place. And every one of them that appears to be marketed seem to say something different. I don't know whether there's a whole lot of regulation on that yet to keep tabs on those products. And so it's our position that there may have been some Delta 8 or some Delta 10 that could have caused that. The amounts that she took, it could have contained up to 3%. Product that she may have taken may have contained a little more than 3%. And so our position is that while there was a positive test, and we don't deny that there was CBD use, that Ms. Johnson didn't intentionally violate her bond. She's currently on a $500,000 bond. I believe the court has available probable cause sheet and the allegations against the client. She's a co-defendant in this case. And allegations against her are basically not that she actually committed the act, but allegations are based on statements that she allegedly made regarding that issue, which we would oppose. And so her lack of criminal history, her cooperation with pretrial, we don't think that that would be a basis to revoke her bond at this time. We would ask the court to deny the state's request.
Thank you, Mr. Tyra. So let me repeat some of the testimony that I heard and correct me if my understanding is wrong. So Mr. Thompson has testified that the results for Ms. Johnson's results in this case reflect THC in the amount of 220 nanograms. His testimony is that he doesn't believe that a 0.3, which is the legal concentration, 0.3%, that would even show over 20 or 50 nanograms, which is the bare minimum that of the testing or the equipment's capability of testing that he uses. However, that there was additional testing sent out to Quest for confirmation as to whether or not Delta 8 or Delta 10 was present, and that additional testing would or could confirm that they've also detected Delta 9, and that Delta 9 would not be legally in any product on the market at this time, but that Delta 8 and that Delta 10 have similar chemical structures that I heard Mr. Thompson say through cross-examination with Mr. Tyra that Delta 8, Delta 10 can look like Delta 9. Is that correct?
Except for the fact Delta 9 up to 0.3% would be legal. I think the court made a statement that Delta 9 would not be a legal substance, but technically up to 0.3% is legal in Texas. So other than that I believe that your statements are correct.
Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the motion under advisement. I'm going to reset this until June 28th at 9 a.m. That will allow the Quest diagnostic testing to come in, to be provided to the state, to be provided to the defendant. If there's an agreement at that time that disposes of the need for the court to rule, then you'll let me know. Otherwise, we'll come back on that. Is there any objection to Mr. Thompson appearing via Zoom next time if needed? All right, so Mr. Thompson, I don't know if you've used Zoom, but you're welcome to come here and testify in person. Likewise, if we need you for a hearing that day, I would allow you, since there's no objection by Mr. Tyra on behalf of the defendant, to appear via Zoom at our next hearing so that you don't have to make the trip down from time. Okay. All right, so we'll reset this until 9 a.m. on Tuesday, June 28th.
Judge, on the status hearing that I believe is set next week, could we?
Yes, so
make
was that,
28th?
status for this same issue?
No, Your Honor, this issue arose after the last one, and
Remind me what the status that we have set next week was.
it was just a pretrial, the general pretrial.
Any objection to the pretrial being reset concurrently with this pretrial release issue to June 28th? Okay, all right, then the court will cancel the pretrial setting of June 2nd. Is that right?
I believe that's correct. Let me double check. I'm looking at the calendar. Yes, sir. It's June 2nd is what's currently set.
All right, court will reset that pretrial hearing. We'll carry it to June 28th at 9 a.m. All right, Ms. Johnson, once you sign the notice of appearance, you get the yellow copy, you're free to go. We'll see you back on Tuesday, June 28th. Yes, I do that. What do you need? You need an order from me to seal those? You need a draft order to seal those. I'll tell you what, I'll go ahead and draft up the order to seal. The state's exhibit 2 down here on the bench. Does anyone have state's exhibit 2? I have one. Good. That's all of our hearings for this morning. Actually, all right, court was going to have the name Keisha call. Deputy McLeish called her name 3 times. Courthouse, Mr. Petty will be heard at 1:30, and that concludes our morning docket. We'll